Hey, welcome back. So, Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn belongs to the Ulster cycle of Irish mythology. He was born when the King of Ulster was hunting these magic birds, and then a snowstorm happens, um, and one of the women accompanying the king is Dectine, the mother of Cuchulainn and sister of the king. They find this cabin to take shelter in from the snowstorm, and shenanigans happen. Lou shows up and he goes, Dectine, you're pregnant and you will name your child Setanta. Dectine is also descended from Angus Og. It's not important, but it's cool to know. So Setanta is born, and he has two stories in his childhood. The first is how he joins Amon Oblak, but that's not very important. Amon Oblak is basically the children of royalty who will go on to become soldiers. But the second story is how Setanta gets the name Cuchulainn, and that's much more interesting. Setanta is playing hurling with his friends when his uncle, the King of Ulster, Concabar MacNassa, sees him, and he invites him to come to a party being held by Cullen the blacksmith. And Setanta's like, sure, I'll come when I'm finished playing hurling. But he is late to the party because he was playing hurling. So he is met by Cullen's guard dog, and when he sees Cullen's guard dog, he gets his hurl and his schlitter, and he hits the dog with the schlitter, killing the dog. Though in other versions, he, and I quote, rips the dog asunder, which is horrifying, but I guess it goes to show that Cuchulainn has monstrous strength. Anyway, the blacksmith and owner of the dog, Cullen, shows up, and he's like, hey, you just killed my dog. And Cuchulainn's like, well, how about this? In the place of your dog, I will take the name Cuchulainn, Hound of Cullen, and I will become your guard dog until you can find another guard dog to replace the one that I just killed. And Cuchulainn, he agrees to this. Or Cullen agrees to this, and Cuchulainn offered it, so obviously he agrees. Also, if you're wondering why Cuchulainn has a H and Cullen doesn't, it's to do with the possessive. Anyway, Cuchulainn then later hears a prophecy that whoever takes up arms today shall become a great warrior and become famous. So Cuchulainn takes up arms. Okay, so this next story, Cuchulainn is 13 or 14-ish, probably. So the men of Ulster go, Cuchulainn, you're pretty handsome, and you're going to steal our wives. So how about you get married? And Cuchulainn, he agrees to this. He's like, sure, I'll get married. But he won't get married to anyone except for this woman, Emer, who actually probably isn't a woman and is also a teenager like him. Now, Emer is the daughter of Forgal Monarch. So Cuchulainn goes to him, and he's like, can I marry your daughter? And Forgal goes, sure, but first you have to go train with Scahawk. Because Forgal, he's really opposed to the idea of having a famous warrior as a son-in-law. So he hopes that Cuchulainn will die when he is training with Scahawk, thus beginning the wooing of Emer. Now, Scahawk is a warrior woman. She lives on the Isle of Skye, and Cuchulainn goes to her, and she does not kill him. And Cuchulainn also becomes lovers with Scahawk's daughter, which, sure, I think that defeats the point of having done this, but, okay. There's also another kid training there under Scahawk. His name is Ferdiad, and Ferdiad and Cuchulainn, they're best friends. I mean, they're the best of friends. It would be a shame if anything happened to this friendship. Anyway, Scahawk teaches Cuchulainn how to use this legendary spear called Gaeltacht. Now, we don't hear what it does yet, but we will soon. Now, Scahawk has a rival, her twin sister Aoife, and they are fighting. But Scahawk doesn't want Cuchulainn and Ferdiad involved in the fighting, so she gives Cuchulainn a sleeping potion, but because he's the main character, he sleeps it off in an hour and he's good to go, effects completely gone. So he gets a sword, and he fights Aoife for a while, and they're evenly matched, and then he goes, hey Aoife, your chariot and horses are falling off of a cliff. And she listens to him. She's like, whoa, I better go look at that. And then Cuchulainn wins the fight. That's probably the most unbelievable part of this whole story. Anyway, Cuchulainn's like, hey, leave Gaeltacht alone, don't fight anymore, and also bear me a son, which is not a thing I've ever heard a 14-year-old say, but Aoife agrees. That's a second lover on this journey in the supposed wooing of Emer, but, maybe it was normal at the time. I don't think it was, though. Anyway, Cuchulainn returns to Ireland. He goes to Fordle Monarch, and Fordle's like, no, you still can't marry my daughter because I don't like you. So he goes to his castle, and he's like, go away, Cuchulainn. So Cuchulainn, again, teenager, storms the castle, again, because he's the main character, and he kills 24 of Fordle's soldiers, and then Fordle falls off the ramparts and dies. So, Cuchulainn, that's great. He marries Emer, and everyone's happy, except for Fordle, but he's dead, so, yeah. So in this next story, Cuchulainn is probably older, 16, 17, I'd say. Now this involves this kid, Conla, and he shows up, and Cuchulainn's like, who are you? And Conla's like, I'm not telling you. And Cuchulainn's like, okay. So they fight in single combat, and Cuchulainn kills Conla. And then Conla's like, hey, I'm your son. Which is, probably something that would have been good to know. But it turns out that Aoife had forbid him, this is his child by Aoife. Aoife had forbidden him to reveal his identity because she was jealous of Cuchulainn for loving another woman after her. That being Emer, which is, okay, but also that was the whole point in his going to the Isle of Skye. I feel like she should have expected this. Anyway, next story. This one involves this woman, Fand. Now, Cuchulainn agrees to protect her from the Fomorians, who are still around. This is in a Mordor situation where just because Balor died, the Fomorians all die. No, they're still here. Now, Fand is the wife of Manannán mac Lir, and the Fomorians want to kidnap her to control the sea. So Cuchulainn is like, hey, I'll protect you, but you have to marry me first. And Fand agrees to this. She's like, okay. So I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, Emer actually tries to kill Fand. But once she sees how much Fand loves Cuchulainn, she's like, you know what, you can marry Cuchulainn. And then Fand is like, no, you love Cuchulainn, so you can stay married to him, and then I'll just leave. And then Manannán mac Lir shows up, and he, has his cloak, and he uses that to make sure that Cuchulainn and Fand never meet again. And then Emer and Cuchulainn drink this potion to erase their memories, which seems like the easy way out, writing-wise, but, who am I to judge the ancient scholars? So anyway, I'm going to talk about items Cuchulainn has now. He has a sword called Cruadin Catuhin, and it could cut the hair off of a man's head without touching his flesh. And it could also cut a man in half without either half knowing what had befallen the other. Which is, amazing, really, because a sword that can measure halves would be very useful. Especially in those, the times when the Firbolg and the Tuatha Dé Danann are like, hey, let's split Ireland in half. But anyway, he also has a charioteer called Laig, dubbed the King of Charioteers, and he has two horses, Liamaka, who is a grey horse, and Dove Sangland, who is a black horse. Leah means grey, Dove means black. Now, the next story is the most famous Cuchulainn story, the Cattle Raid of Cooley, also called the Táin Bó Cúailnge. This is also sometimes referred to as the Irish Iliad, and Cuchulainn is also sometimes called the Irish Achilles. So this takes place when the King of Connacht has this white bull, and his wife, Queen Maeve, is jealous of it. So she goes to Ulster because they have the brown bull of Cooley, and she wants it because she's jealous of her husband's white bull. Now, the men of Ulster cannot defend Ulster from the invading army because the Macha, remember her? She cursed them to feel labour pains in their time of greatest need. This happened when the King of Ulster made his wife run a foot race while pregnant, which, kind of deserved, actually. So anyway, Cuchulainn is the only person left in Ulster to defend it, because he is 17 and not technically a man. So he uses the ancient right to single combat. So Cuchulainn is allowed to fight the invading army one at a time, and before one of these single combats, the Morrigan appears in disguise as a beautiful woman and offers to love him, and Cuchulainn is like, no, because he's all about being faithful to his wife. Never has he even considered being unfaithful. Anyway, the Morrigan, she is not happy about this, so she reveals herself and then turns into a bunch of different animals and fights Cuchulainn, and he injures her 3 times. So anyway, he goes back to fighting the invading army in the single combat. He's doing pretty great, but then Ferdiad shows up because he is one of the soldiers of Connacht. And they fight for days, like actual days. They even share a campfire at the start, but then they stop. They don't like each other anymore after that. So then, after days of fighting, Cuchulainn pulls out Gaeltacht, and this is where we see what it does. You throw it with the foot, and then once it hits the intended target, 30 barbs shoot out of the target's body, which is frankly more than I'm willing to draw, but still very deadly. So this happens to Ferdiad, and he is very dead. And Cuchulainn, he is also very injured. And in some places, this is even where he dies, but that's no fun. So instead, we're going to go with the version where Lugh shows up, and he's like, hey, I'm your father, nice meeting you, anyway, I'm healing you now. But this knocks Cuchulainn out for 3 days. So, when he gets back, he hears that Amon Macha, remember from before, they are actual children who are going to be trained to fight as soldiers. They have fought the Connacht army in his stead and gotten destroyed. They're all dead because they're actual children. So this causes Cuchulainn to enter a trance, sort of, called a riestrad. Now, the direct translation of this is warp spasm, and I found 2 definitions of this. The first one is, he shakes from head to toe and revolves within his skin that becomes red and hot to touch. His features become bestial, one eye becoming large and bloodshot, while the other becomes extremely small and menacing. His mouth becomes impossibly large and emits both fire and sparks, while his hair becomes spiked and emits further flame. The second description I've seen is, the first warp spasm seized Cuchulainn and made him into a monstrous thing, hideous and shapeless, unheard of. His shanks and his joints, every knuckle and angle and organ from head to foot, shook like a tree in the flood or a reed in the stream. His body made a furious twist inside his skin, so that his feet and shins switched to the rear and his heels and calves switched to the front. On his head the temple sinews stretched to the nape of his neck, each mighty, immense, measureless knob, as big as the head of a month-old child. He sucked one eye so deep into his head that a wild crane couldn't probe it onto his cheek out of the depths of his skull. The other eye fell out along his cheek, his mouth weirdly distorted, his cheek peeled back from his jaws until the gullet appeared. His lungs and his liver flapped in his mouth and throat. His lower jaw struck the upper a lion-killing blow, and fiery flakes, large as a ram's fleece, reached his mouth from his throat. The hair of his head twisted like the tangle of a red thorn bush stuck in a gap. If a royal apple tree with all its kingly fruit were shaken above him, scarce an apple would reach the ground, but each would be spiked on a bristle of his hair, as it stood up on his scalp with rage. So, very cheery. So using this Rheastrad, Cuchulainn he forgoes single combat and fights the armies of Connacht in groups. Then he's killing hundreds of them. And then the men of Ulster stop feeling labor pains, I guess, and they come out to help Cuchulainn fight. Cuchulainn stays on the sidelines for most of this because he's very injured, until the army of Connacht starts to retreat, when Cuchulainn appears again, and he goes to kill Queen Maeve, but then spares her because she is a woman and it is bad to kill women, which is fair, but also he killed his foster brother, so I don't know where he draws the line here. Anyway, Queen Maeve is very angry at Cuchulainn. You know, the nerve of him to spare her life. That's just terrible. So Cuchulainn is fed dog meat by Queen Maeve. Now, why is this bad? He swore never to eat dog meat. So why did he take the dog meat? He also swore never to refuse a meal, which is, foresight of Prometheus right there. Anyway, now that his spirit is broken, 3 magic spears, each said to be able to kill a king, were brought out, and the first spear hit his charioteer Laig, the king of charioteers, second hit Liamaka, the king of horses, and the third hit Cuchulainn. So Cuchulainn gets up out of the chariot, ties himself to a standing stone so that he will die on his feet, and then the men of Connacht don't dare approach him until a raven or crow lands on his shoulder, and they're like, okay, he's dead now. Also, this raven or crow is the Morrigan getting revenge, and she watches as a beaver drinks blood from his body. Anyway, the men of Connacht go to cut off his head when the hero's light shines from his body, and the person going to cut off his head drops his sword and cuts off his own hand. And the hero's light won't stop until they cut off Cuchullainn's right hand, because that's the hand he holds his sword in. Also, just to know, when Christians talk about this story, or when the Christian monks rewrote this story, they said it was holy light. I heard hero's light. This is, just something to be aware of. So that's the end of Cuchulainn's story. He is apparently later summoned by St. Patrick once, but, I'd take any story about St. Patrick with a grain of salt. So, let's, do some comparison here between Cuchulainn, and Achilles. Cuchulainn is sometimes called the Irish Achilles, and the cattle raids of Cooley are sometimes called the, Irish Iliad. Anyway, the real important thing to do here, who would win in a fight? And honestly, I think if it's Homer's Achilles, the one that doesn't have the I can't be damaged anywhere except for my heel, I think Cuchulainn would win, especially if he had Rheastrad. Actually, never mind that, exclusively if he had Rheastrad, because Achilles is an adult man and Cuchulainn is 17, so yeah, I think without Rheastrad, Cuchulainn would very much lose to Achilles. So then, if Achilles did have the I can't be hurt anywhere except for my heel thing, there's no way Cuchulainn wins. The only way I could possibly see him winning is if he uses the Rheastrad fire thing and, gives Achilles heat stroke. But 1, I don't think his fire is that hot, and 2, he would have to be very close to Achilles, and he'd just die. So yeah, that's my take on it. If you have a different take, feel free to share. That's the end. That's the end of the story. Yeah. I always found it funny how we called Cuchulainn when he probably found a replacement for Cullen, at least a year or two after that story takes place. So really his name is Setanta, after that. But we just call him Cuchulainn, even though that That's not really his name. Also, for the cattle raids of Cooley in his defense of Ulster, he gained the title the Hound of Ulster, hence the title of this video. That's why I called him that. So yeah. I also should mention with the Achilles Cuchulainn comparison that both of them received prophecies that they would die young and become famous. Cuchulainn overhearing his as a child, and Achilles receiving his from his mother prior to going to Troy. They also single-handedly fight armies, but Achilles was much less single-handedly than Cuchulainn, although he didn't have the right of single combat that Cuchulainn did. So it's about even in that regard. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Please, like and subscribe. All that jazz. Goodbye.